Hello and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve podcast. Today's guest is a music journalist and DJ. His name is Dan Tsourekas. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm all good, man. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Did I nail the second name?
90%.
Oh, oh,
I'll
oh.
give you that. It's a Tsourekas.
Tsourekas. See.
Yeah.
And real quick, Vilma. Don't say I never give Greece any love because Dan is literally, he's from Greece. He grew up in Greece. So there you go. One of my followers and good friends, Vilma, is from Greece. And she says
Oh,
I don't give it enough love. So there you go. Right. There's a lot of different ways that we could go about this. For those watching and listening, Dan is a friend of mine, and he's in the music industry. He's deep in it in Manchester, and I think the main there's a lot of people I know that I want to get on the show and interview, and I'm slowly kind of doing that. And I think the thing that really stood out to me right off the get go was when you started talking about your interviewing experiences, because it's obviously something that I identify with, and particularly just like the way you go about it. You obviously gave the Death Havana
yeah,
story and a few
yeah.
others, and I guess let's focus on interviewing for a second. Like when was like the first time you started having to interview people, and like how did you kind of learn to do that?
So basically, I was a long-term writer for this independent magazine called Square One magazine. I don't write for them anymore, but more to that later. Um, and they were the first kind of publication that gave me kind of access to review gigs and albums and all that kind of stuff. So I had basically contacts with this band called Distant Blue, this like kind of alt band from Nottingham. I knew the members. We don't really talk anymore, but basically they were releasing a like new single back in like 2022. So I obviously wanted my main kind of like thing is I like supporting local bands that I think will be big, I try and focus on the niche rather than interview or review artists that are massive. Even though obviously, you have your bucket list, so you kind of want to check some people off, but um so long story short, I emailed my editor and asked her if we could possibly do an interview with the lads at Distant Blue and have it on the magazine because every now and again they have physical copies of Square One magazine out as like a limited kind of thing. So she agreed to it basically. So I interviewed Distant Blue. Um, Back in 2022, it was like a 45, I think 30, 45 minute interview because they didn't really have like PR or anything. So it was like just hop on and like we'll just discuss it. Um, and the way I approached it for that time, like the first time was basically I went on the whole point of I hate just doing point blank Q&As. I always have hated doing point blank Q&As. I prefer just having like a conversation and then while the conversation is like being made, then integrate the questions that I had ready into that in a sort of way. So it's kind of you could possibly see it as like a guided conversation, but at the same time it still is coming out more fluid, more naturally in that kind of sense. Um, and it was featured on the third printed issue of Square One, and that was the first interview that I ever did as a journal.
And you touched on something important there about how to put together a good interview often is a conversation. That's exactly what this show is. And
Yeah.
I've been working at it for 4 years now. And I think there's always room for improvement. But the thing that I've noticed is that you kind of adapt yourself to each guest somewhat. So like whatever their kind of vibe is, you adapt yourself accordingly. Do you find yourself having to do that a little bit? Or is it
Yeah,
just
yeah. I think it depends as well because keep in mind that like with artists especially, never mind like an actual like people. Well, artists are actual people. I mean, like not like in the sense of if you're interviewing like let's say a journalist or someone that's in the music business or this that and the other. with artists especially, it's quite difficult because they each have their own kind of like unique kind of twist to them because they're so out there, and you have to be out there as a person to be able to do what they're doing. Um,
Hmm.
so if you consider like, yeah, if you like interview 10 artists, for example, and they all have 10 completely like different personalities that are like full on, you need to get to know them, I guess. So that's why I spend the first 5, 10 minutes trying to have the conversation with them, because if I see how they respond to like just the normal chit chat conversation, then I see where I can kind of like go with the actual questions that I want to ask them without like pushing them too much, you know.
What's
Um,
like it's like the weirdest or most challenging interaction you've had in an interview.
it was probably Def Havana, to be honest. Um, don't get me wrong, like they were lovely. It was actually like brilliant after a while. Like the PR like emailed me and told me that they actually loved the interview and everything, and that was on the fourth issue of Square One. But I feel like the actual predicament of the interview, like just it or they it was under tough circumstances, I'd say, because
Okay.
the interview was at like 10:30 in the morning,
Right.
and I'd been at the last day of Outbreak Festival the day before. So, because I was reviewing Outbreak Festival in 22, so we had to do it was the Outbreak Festival. Obviously, in 22 was a 4 day at Bowlers. It's the same place they're hosting it this year, but it was like the pre-show had like Counterparts and Static Dress and See Your Space Cowboy leading to like the main 3 days, which we were getting battered in the pit because it was like Knocked Loose, Turnstile, like Touche Amore, Vane FM. It was a proper like hard festival, and it says a lot considering you have to sign a waiver to actually get into the place.
Holy
Um,
shit, really?
if you want to get into the pit area, you have to sign a waiver for a special wristband. Because keep in mind, it's like a 5,000 cap festival, but they've kept it no barrier, so people can like actually like go on stage and jump off.
I've always found stuff like that really stupid, just on a side note, but like if you're in a mosh pit, what the fuck do you think is gonna happen?
Oh yeah, no, don't get me wrong. Like obviously, but I think because of the nature of hardcore moshing, they've kind of kept it. Well, yeah, we'll make you sign this because if you get severely injured, then you can't really do much because you
Yeah,
basically.
but that's my point exactly. Like, how can you like be like,
Everyone.
oh, you punched me in the pit, I'm gonna sue you, or like, I
Well,
broke my leg. It's like it's your own fault.
I think that the reason they did it was because obviously the festival's split in the middle with a barrier, basically. So if you want to sit and chill outside of the pit, you can behind that barrier. It's for people that just want to kind of like sit and watch the band rather than get involved.
Sure.
So I just finished that weekend and it was hectic. And I remember doing the interview on my mate's laptop in the uni accommodation flat. Um, at
Glamorous.
like 11 o'clock in the morning, hanging out my ass. And I opened like the Zoom to start interviewing them, and you can just tell that they're in the same position. Like they've probably just woken up. They've making a cup of coffee. The last thing they want to do is have a conversation about the album with the journalist. So the first couple 10 minutes, I'd say, were quite difficult because obviously, like they seemed tired. They'd seemed like
Yeah.
well, they'd seemed grumpy. They weren't eventually, but I was obviously like just not in a mood whatsoever. But the more we started conversating, and I think the question that did it was I brought up the question being like every because obviously they're used to like, oh, how was the recording process for this album, this that, and the other. And I just full on dived in being like, I know people ask you about the recording process, but how was it jumping from a 5-man recording process to a 2-man recording process? Because obviously that it's just the two of them now. Um, and after that, we just like went full ahead, and I think it was like a 45 minute interview. Um, and it was enjoyable, but I'd definitely say that it was more the circumstances that made it the toughest one rather than the actual people. Like they're lovely.
I think something in what you were saying there is key as well. It's like clearly you've done your research, right? Which shows that you give a shit, right? And I know this sounds like a really obvious thing, but it's amazing to me how many interviews and interviewers just don't do their research. So you ask those questions, and like you say, they've been asked those questions a million times, but you can easily ask those questions. You can easily be like, how's the album? How's the tour? Blah, blah, blah. Like, talk about all the stuff that everyone knows. But if you then dig a little bit deeper and be like, oh, what was this like? Like, I would imagine I'd feel like X, Y, and Z. Da, 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 da. And like, you show that you actually care. And then that's how you get the sort of the passion out of the person,
Yeah, I
you
think
know?
it's an interesting one because like I feel like so many. Well, I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't see it all the time. Like, I know it's like the big publications and everything, but at the same time, I've seen in recent time, I've seen like some pretty good interviews. Like,
Mm.
the quality's been going up. You know what I mean in terms of actual like interviewing, and I think that's because a lot of the bands, a lot of the bands now have got like completely like themed albums, concept albums. They've put work into it. The marketing behind it's become more kind of like detailed. It's a completely different spectrum. Like in some cases, I'd compare it's like the music videos, the way that they tie in the concepts. You could compare them to like short films. It's like
Mm.
it's
Yeah.
it's widely changed. So I feel like now that that's completely like changing and there's more detail in the actual promotion, the actual writing, all that kind of stuff, you kind of have to do your research if you want to be able to interview them.
Well,
Yeah,
it's that, and it's like to get people thinking. Like I'm just thinking off the top of my head, like a couple of times I've seen Metallica like interviewed in different situations, and it was interesting seeing their reactions. Like one of them's from that some kind of monster shit show documentary that they did. For anyone who's not seen it, go check it out. It's fascinating. It's like Spinal Tap on steroids. It's interesting. But there's a bit where they've just done the album, they're getting interviewed, and they show like a series of like press clips. And one of them, this guy asks him, like James Hetfield, he's like, one word, one word to describe the last 20 odd years of your career. And like James is just sitting there like, damn, like one word. Like, is there one word? And you can see him thinking, and then like, you
yeah,
know what I mean? Fast forward a few years ago, there was a female interviewer for a metal publication. I don't know if it was Loudwire or one of the other ones. I can't remember. But she's sitting to the right, and it's Hetfield and Hammett sitting to the left. Similar vibes. Like you can tell she's really passionate. Grew up with heavy metal, all this, knows her stuff. And I mean, how many times have these guys been interviewed over the years? You know what I mean? Like you've heard it all. You know what to expect. But they're engaged. They're interested. They're having a good time. And I think not to sound like a broken record, but yeah, it is about getting your guests comfortable, showing you've done your research, X, Y, and Z. And I don't know, I think to some extent, yeah, just actually being interested in the interview, you know?
the the best piece the best piece of advice I ever received was from my tutor in uni, Edgar. Legend, absolute legend. Yeah, he was chief in editor for Metal Hammer Germany at one point.
Holy shit.
He's interviewed Metallica plenty of times, as well as like Alice Cooper, Ice T.
Holy shit.
He's had his fair go. He's an amazing journalist. And I asked him for advice for interviewing because obviously it was when I was first getting into it, and he straight up said, "Save for the questions that you think they might walk out on, save for last."
Nice. Yeah. Well, see, that's another one as well. The controversial
Yeah, yeah,
questions. I
yeah.
mean, I will say this. I think because we're talking interviews and journalism. These are two different fields, and you can speak to this being a music journalist. Like, someone's got to ask the tough questions eventually. Someone's got to be that person. Now, how you choose to do that, that's up to you. Some
Yeah.
people like to sensationalize shit, try and get a reaction out of people, try and get that viral clip, whatever. Other people like to kind of approach it a bit more empathetically, like, okay, this is a difficult situation. Da 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 da. If I was going to do that, that's the way I would go about it. That's who I
Well,
am
yeah,
as a person.
you don't want to like just straight up jump in and like be like, so
No,
this happened, and just wait for a reaction because that's not the point of you interviewing the person, is it? It's like,
no. I mean, I think, and you kind of touched on it earlier, but like, this is key. You're interviewing a human being. People often forget, oh, like, oh, this amazing, oh, it's Metallica. Wow. Like, it's just people.
yeah,
Yeah, they're huge celebrities. Yeah, they're successful, blah, blah, blah. But they are just people. So when you are asking them, like, hey, what was it like when this person died? Like, how the fuck do you think it
yeah.
was? Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
It kind of proves the point because, like, obviously, like I'm going to bring up Outbreak Festival again, but
sure.
they had a podcast tent, and
Podcast tent.
they have
Wow.
a podcast tent every year where,
Cool.
yeah, so they've got
Where do I sign up?
It's a really, really, really cool guy. I can't remember his name, but the podcast is called, I think it's either 100 or 1,000 words or less. Um,
Interesting.
Really, really good podcast. And they got a podcast tent outside the stage areas of bowlers where you can choose to go and see it as other bands are playing, or they have like a little interval. But he basically interviews artists and producers from the bands that are playing at the festival each day. Um, and then after the podcast, then obviously the artists go outside for like a minute or two to meet anyone
Mm.
that like just sitting around basically. So I met quite a few people through that podcast then because I was there most of the day basically for the artists that I wasn't really that bothered seeing. So I, I met
Fair enough.
like, yeah, well, it is what it is. You know, you're gonna have a band that doesn't really,
Sure.
strike your interest that much. Especially when it comes to like meeting, like obviously I met Brian Garris from Knock Loose. I met Kadeem from Loathe, Daniel Tracy from Deaf Heaven. You know, it was quite a varied experience chatting to people. And the one thing I've noticed was that I'm going to bring up Brian Garris's case specifically. He's the shyest person. He's like one of the shyest people I've ever met, which is quite contrasting to his personality on stage. And everyone was like running up to him with cameras and vinyls and shit. And I like the way I go about it is like I don't really want a picture. I don't really want you to sign anything. I just like having a chat with the person whose music I enjoy. So I walked up to him and like shook his hand and just started asking him about how he found the festival like so far and all that kind of stuff. Um, and it's funny seeing someone be so shy and come out guns blazing on stage. Like it's quite fascinating to say the least.
It's interesting, yeah, like that feeling of going on stage. I mean, it's a performance of it, well, obviously,
Yeah, yeah,
but like you are becoming something else. And often when I've gone on stage, like I don't get shy anymore. I just go on and I let go. And for however long it is, that's the performance. And then you come off. But the interesting thing I've found is that you immediately revert back to, oh, I'm just this person. So that
yeah.
when I've come off stage, I'm like, right, I need a drink. I need a piss. I need a cigarette.
Yeah,
Like that's all I care about. And like, but obviously people want to talk to you, which is fine. But do you know what I mean? So like in the case of that guy, I imagine it's probably like he just wants to go and backstage and just chill, maybe
chill.
have
Yeah,
a
yeah,
beer and not talk to anyone, which is totally fine. Some people might read that as like, oh, he's a pretentious cunt. Probably not. It probably is just, as you say, he's shy.
yeah,
He
yeah.
just don't want to talk
But
or doesn't
like,
know how.
yeah, Outbreak's one of those festivals that I'll always rep. I'll always shout out. They're doing amazing, amazing job at representing the DIY scene, like the hardcore scene. They've added hip hop to the mix as well, so I think hip hop and hardcore interlink quite well. But this year's one's going to be mad. I'm going next week. Yeah, it's next week. I'm doing. It's Action Bronson headlining the Friday, Basement and Have Heart headlining the Saturday, and then American Football playing their first album in full on the Sunday. So it's gonna be quite interesting. You're gonna see a lot of grown men cry, especially during the American football set. But Yeah, exciting stuff, man. I'm always excited. It's like a breath of fresh air, really, because you have so many gigs throughout the year that, sometimes you just might find rinse repeat. And going to a festival kind of always just cleanses your palate a bit and like just gets you back into the mood for stuff. So I'm doing that, and I'm doing the outdoor corn one in London in August, which I'm quite excited for. But it's the whole, I don't know, a festival reminds me of a holiday in a weird way.
Okay, extrapolate.
Yeah, in a very weird way, a festival reminds me of a holiday because it's like this big, you pay about 200, 300 quid to go.
Mm.
It's the 3 to 5 day. Some have camping. Yeah.
I think I will say this for anyone who's never been to a festival, definitely do it at least once in your life. It's an experience. Yeah, I went to like Download Sonosphere Festival back in the day, and it was fucking awesome. It was great. You meet amazing people, you have an amazing time, you listen to great music, you obviously get very, very drunk. And also, there's other things. Okay, I know this is really obvious, but for anyone who's not been to a festival, there's just weird things that happen that just wouldn't really happen in any other context. So, like, it's a Thursday or a Friday. Oh, if you, let's say you go download festival early, you go on a Thursday. There's nothing to do on a Thursday. You can go on the fairground rides, maybe check out the stalls, eat, drink. That's it. There's no bands on until the Friday. So there's pretty much all they can do is just get drunk, maybe do some karaoke. So you're doing that. You wake up the next day. It's 8 a.m., 9 a.m. You crack open a beer. Now, normally it'd be like, oh, that's a bit early, isn't it? But not at Download Festival or whatever other festival. It doesn't apply. Like you're in a kind of a bubble. It's like being at uni. The rules don't apply. You drink and you eat and you go to your own schedule, and that's that.
With Outbreak in 22, I couldn't be asked drinking because I wasn't that much of a drinker, but like I was bouncing off the walls on Emerge. So those big like grey bottles of energy drink that they have, like I was probably on like 8, 9 pints of those, just like running up and down the entire festival the whole weekend. Yeah, festivals are interesting to say the least. Like I've been to a few Outbreak. I did Boomtown in 22. That was an experience. That was an interesting experience.
Why?
Um, it's really interesting seeing like because obviously the main focus is I loved every second of it. It's like I saw De La Soul, I saw Fortet, so many people that I've been meaning to see for so long. But I think it's a themed festival, so they've got paid actors. So
Would you mean like people at the sides doing kind of?
not it no, it's so
What
basically
do you mean?
it's it's like a microcosm. It's like a little bubble. So each stage, you've got like 7 stages. Is in a different district. So you've got Old Town, which is like a western old town with saloons. You've got
Oh, sick.
yeah, you've got Botanica, which is like you're in the forest with all like ivy, like leaves and shit. You've got Megalopolis, which is like a futuristic town. Um, and they have actors in each district role playing like cowboys and like forest people, and they send you on like quests. It's yeah.
Vic, I want to do this one day. Make it
It's
happen.
it's quite mad. Like yeah, so like we'd go to Botanica to watch like Big Pig play on the main stage, and we'd see this woman standing outside a little building with a door leading like underground, and we just followed that, and then they'd send us on a quest to find like things. You just see there's hidden stages that you can get to only if you like complete certain quests in areas.
That's
Like
sick.
it's insane. Yeah.
It's like
Um,
an actual side quest from like Skyrim or some shit.
yeah. It's like a side burst, which, to be fair, I can understand because obviously, you've got 70,000 people at a festival, and it's a predominantly drum and bass and electronic music festival. So marginally, 90% of them are going to be off the face during the festival. So I'd imagine if someone was tripping balls while going on while at the festival and got sent on a quest, you would feel like you'd be in Skyrim, wouldn't
Yeah.
you?
God
But
damn.
yeah, it was an interesting one. Definitely nothing like I've not experienced anything like that ever since. It was definitely an interesting like kind of concept for a festival. Um, which is why in my review I predominantly focused on the actual kind of like atmosphere of the festival rather than the music because I think I quoted it as well. I was like the music felt like the soundtrack to the festival, if that makes sense. Like it felt like it was more of a secondary, like in the background thing. Um, but
That's interesting.
it was wild. Yeah, it was insane. And then obviously the Blue Dot Festival in 2023, but that was a bit of a mess. Not because of the organization, everything was fine, the bands were great, but obviously Jodrell Bank, um, it pissed it down. So we were
Ah.
knee deep in mud. Um, and then they put down wood pellets, but they put the wood pellets down after it had rained, so it was just the same
Floating wood.
wood pellets on like, floating around. Yeah, they had to cancel the Sunday. They didn't let people in the Sunday. If anyone was at the festival already, they could go watch the bands, but they weren't allowing people with day tickets in because the cars were sinking in the mud.
Oh shit. Do they get refunds then, I
Yeah,
guess?
yeah. Of course they did. Yeah,
That
yeah,
sucks, man. I'll be
yeah,
gutted.
yeah. That was quite. Yeah, that was quite an interesting one. But Jodrell Bank itself was phenomenal. Like they had these little custom made R2D2s that were like roaming around the festivals. Yeah, that was fun.
You mentioned reviews. Let's talk reviews. Have you ever experienced any backlash for your reviews? And if so, how did you handle it?
Um, well, it's an interesting one with that because I post reviews and I usually just post them and just have them out there, and that's that. I don't I don't really look at like the comments under the page because obviously, um, it's I feel like I ref I didn't send in. Okay, you see, returning theme. Sometimes when life has gotten a bit too busy, or this, that, and the other, I'm pretty sure I have ADHD, so I get caught in like these things where my attention span just like either completely stops or I get sidetracked by life and do other things to the point where there have been cases in which I've forgotten my deadline. Uh,
Sure.
and sometimes like I'll post a late review or anything and I understand why like PRs will be a bit like iffy on the whole thing,
Hmm.
but or editors or this that and the other, but it's not, there's no malicious intent behind it. And second of all, you have to keep in mind that so far for the past 3 years, considering like big publications want experience rather than talent, um I have been
Ooh.
I've been like an unpaid freelance journalist for like 3 years now,
Unpaid. Oh, hold on.
Yeah.
Unpaid.
Yeah, because a lot of the freelance publications, they don't have sponsors.
That's
A
outrageous for
lot of the
3 years.
So keep in mind, like when I understand, like when it might like upset a PR, like upset. Don't get me wrong, I've been paid for some, there's but like the majority of them haven't been. And the thing is like the whole point of a deadline, like it's a 50-50 with me. Like I understand no matter what, yeah, you've got a deadline, you have to give in a review within 3 days. But if for any chance, like because of life reasons, I failed to upload on the deadline, and it's like in consideration, it's like, well, on the one hand, okay, but on the second hand, I'm not getting paid for this at the same time. And I know that's not the mentality to have when going about things, but it does kind of discourage you sometimes in a lot of ways.
I get it. I get it. Yeah.
But I wouldn't say I didn't give in. Which one was it? Architects, their latest album. What was it? Symptoms of a Broken Spirit. I fucking hate that album. Uh,
Okay.
I actually, yeah.
Why? Why'd you hate it?
It's just, do you know? there's it's weird to explain. So like it's obviously Architects started out as a like proper like old school metalcore band, like vibes like bordering like old Bring Me the Horizon,
I was there for it. I remember
Yeah,
growing up in
like
London. It was crazy times. They're
it
really
was
good.
mad. I feel like they did push the envelope of modern metalcore like quite a lot, and to see them instead of continue to push the envelope, revert to what modern metalcore has become, where it's just like a catchy chorus and a one like it's like
Okay.
Bring Me the Horizon, next gen post-human. Everyone loved it. I really don't see the appeal in it. In my eyes, I was like, I've been waiting 4 years for this, and I realized that it was like obviously Jordan Fisher's left the band and they had to like re-record or rewrite or even write completely new songs for it. But um it's such I get they did say that with each post-human they want to do like a different kind of genre. um, but this one just didn't quite do it for me. But it was the same with Symptoms of a Broken Spirit. It just doesn't quite do it for me. And I probably when I said I fucking hate this album, I didn't like mean it maliciously. It probably just came out in the heat of the moment with like because I'm very passionate about albums and music in general. So if I don't like something, it's not because I think the band are shit. It's because I know they can do so much better.
What is it they say? First response is the truth. Second is the
Yeah,
political one.
fair enough. Yeah.
No, I get what you're saying. Look, listen, at its core, music reviews, you know, critiquing, it's personal preference. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? It just didn't cut it for you,
just
you
didn't
know?
click. And I think
Yeah. But
that's yeah. Sorry, go on, man.
well, all I was going to add to that is, like, I mean, you broke it down really well. Like, there's a certain level of expectation for a band like that, especially with the back catalogue they have and the influence they've had over the whole scene over the years. I mean, as I mentioned, like I was there for like the very early days of like metalcore, like Bring Me the Horizon, Architects. It was fucking crazy times. It really was, and they were writing some amazing music and putting on incredible live shows. These days, I mean, I'm not as up to date with the scene, but I know how much it's changed. I know the sound has changed
Yeah.
considerably over the last decade. And what I will say is, I think when you talk about an anticipation for a record and expectation, I feel like maybe the other side of that is if they didn't do those things, maybe there might be less interest in them. Like,
Yeah.
because everyone talks about relevancy these days, don't they? Like, oh, are they as relevant as they used to be? Da, 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 da. How do you stay relevant? By being in tune with what's going on. You see that in the pop industry
Well,
quite often.
yeah, this is what I mean. It's like, don't get me wrong, like Bring Me the Horizon, they were like a very seminal part of my childhood and my teenage years, like growing up. It was There Is a Hell, Sempiternal, like the kind of like classic ones. But I do think that even though their music might not resonate with me now
Mm-hmm.
much as it did beforehand, they I think I know this might be a bold statement to make, but I think Bring Me the Horizon will be kind of like this generation's Metallica.
That's fair. That's
That
what I
because
mean.
building a brand out of it. It's not just the music humor. I mean, hell, I'm like wearing Drop Dead right now.
Drop Dead still thing?
Yeah,
Holy shit! I thought they went out. Oh wow. Okay. I I,
yeah,
I remember I remember I had the original T-shirts
yeah.
back in the
Drop
day. I'm
Dead's
so
still a
fucking
thing.
old.
This one's actually like to give you an idea of what they're doing. Like the hoodie I've got on now is the collaboration
Wow.
they did with Junji Ito, the horror manga artist. Like, yeah,
Cool.
they're still really going strong as well. But that's what I mean. It's like it's kind of moved past the music for Bring Me now.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? That it's the whole imagery, it's the branding. It's like it's going down a really similar path to how Metallica is a brand now.
Do you think
See,
that could hurt the music though if it becomes too much about the brand and not enough about the music?
well, I mean, just see Metallica's music.
I mean, that's a tough one. I don't know. I felt like their
Um,
last good album was Hardwired, and then after that, it just kind of.
Hardwired was all right. Yeah. I remember when was it? Was it Lux Eterna? When they dropped the single for that, and I was I was in the house with Adam, my housemate, and we were like, oh, oh, let's watch the music video. Let's watch the music video. And we turned it on, and it was like 30 seconds in. We both looked at each other. It was like, what the fuck is this? Like this is so boring.
I honestly feel like it's an album of B-sides.
Yeah,
Like I know how that harsh that might sound, but when you can consider that there's such a big gap between albums, and obviously for a band like that to add a new album every time is a big deal. It's a band that's brought you some classic genre defining music. So every time they put a new record forward, that is a big deal still. And then I think a lot of people regarded Hardwire as like a return to form.
yeah,
So then when they released Lux Eterna after all these years, the anticipation, I remember the marketing was great for it. And then as you say, the music came out and I same feeling. I was like, is that it?
yeah.
Ah,
It's like,
okay.
but I mean, here's a point I'm going to raise, which I understand to an extent, but like with music journalism, with the reviews and everything, it is a tricky one because obviously people are going to remember the bad reviews more than they will the good ones. I mean, just look at Anthony Fantana's case.
Oh,
Everyone who talks
yes.
about him just talks about the bad reviews he does. They don't even acknowledge like, the good ones. They're like, oh, you gave this person a 4. What the fuck are you doing? And then like, he's gone and like Charlie XCX's recent album, he gave a 10. Like
I think
it,
the thing that blows my mind with that is that like people just forget that it's a critique.
yeah,
It's not like he's right or wrong. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, okay, I'll give you an example. Like, I've spoken about this on the show before, but I remember he shat all over Green Day's "Father of All Motherfuckers" album.
Mhm.
But the one cool thing that he always does, which I think a lot of people miss sometimes, is that he'll give you a breakdown of their career up until that point, kind of like a synopsis of their
Yeah,
history.
yeah,
Like, okay, this is where we've led us to, and in the last few years, da 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 da. And the thing he's often said, say with like Eminem, is that okay, he's not the artist that we once knew. Is different, and I feel this is lazy. And da, da, da. A lot of his critiques tend to be more centered around that. Like, I feel
yeah,
this is lazy. I feel like this could be better. Like, he wants the records to be better. It's not like I'm just going to shit on everything because lol. Like, he wants it to be better. He's a fan of
yeah.
music. That's the
No, no, you
point.
can you can completely tell that, and like I feel obviously when I write my reviews, um, I'll tell you the one thing I hate doing. Like I want to reach a point where, as a journalist, I can be able to do this. Is I hate grading albums.
Yeah, I
So
remember you saying this.
I,
Yeah.
I hate grading albums because the way I write my review is I write my experience listening to the album for the first time, what I liked about it, what I may not have liked about it, and then that encourages the reader to go, you know what? I might listen to it for myself. When I slap a number underneath that essay that I have written, people just go and look at the number and then decide whether they want to listen to it or not purely from what I've rated it.
But okay, playing devil's advocate for a second. If you put like a 10 on something or a 5 on something,
Yeah.
that's huge because it's like, I regard this as a perfect album. Like, okay, for example, just off the top of my head, I regard Paramore's Brand New Eyes album as a perfect album,
Mhm.
like from head to toe,
Yeah.
from head to toe, from beginning to end. And there's a lot of reasons for why I feel that way. But like, if we were talking like, here's a collection of records, different scores, this is perfect. Why is it perfect? And then you have to explain your thought process as a reviewer for why you feel that way. I feel like, although I know you don't like the idea of a scoring system, if people understand you and how you rate things and what your ethos is on what makes a good record versus what makes a bad record, I feel like in a way the score helps because it's like, oh, he's given it a lower review. I wonder why. I need to read, you know?
Yeah, that's fair enough, but I feel like, in the age of TikToks and short attention
Yeah.
spans, obviously no one's going to sit and read through like a 1,000 word essay in these days. It's
I
like,
don't know. I disagree with that. I think the vast majority, yeah, all right, fair
yeah,
enough.
yeah, yeah,
But
vast
like,
majority, obviously,
I don't know. I feel like a lot of
I'm
people
not
would.
saying it. I'm not saying it in a nihilistic sense. I'm saying
Mm.
it more of the sense of like, it's if I spend, a certain amount of time like discussing an album, um, I don't know. It feels like I can't just like I don't mind scoring an album. I don't like scoring albums, but I'm obviously, if I have to do it, I will. It's just more of the case of I can't
So like
yeah, no,
restrictive.
it's kind of just like a me. I think it might just be a me thing, where it's like I don't like just slapping numbers on experiences.
Do you find it restrictive?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I really do. It's like I can explain and characterize something as a perfect album without the need of putting a 10 in front of it. Like if I write that it's a perfect album, people already get the gist of the fact that it's perfect. Um, but
Fair play, man. Stick to your guns. I think, like, obviously, as you progress with your career over the years, I think,
it might
obviously,
change. It might change down
woo!
along the years, you never know. But at the minute, that's kind of where I'm at. And it's like the what was it? Like, okay, regardless of album reviews, okay, yeah, but if I ever see anyone rate a live music show, that's just like what the fuck, it's
Okay, why can't we review music shows?
no, not review, but like if you think about it, how can you like score a live show? How can you score a live performance?
You've lost me here. I mean, of course you can. Versus. Uh, okay, let's say they've done 10 shows
Yeah.
on a tour, and you're saying like their best ever show was this show, and these are the reasons why. And then you sort of use that as a base point and you work from there, maybe. But I guess you could say like, okay, crowd interaction, overall sound, was it mixed well? I mean, a lot of that's going to come down to the sound. I'm starting to see the problems now as as I start to think about
It
this.
might come as quite confusing if you've got like five journalists reviewing five different tour dates and the range spans from like 1 to 5 star and each night is a different rating. How
Well, just thinking about it, a lot of these factors are out of the hands of the artist
Yeah,
because the like I said, the sound engineering that's not up to the band. The crowds sometimes like a band can go out and fucking kill it, and the crowds don't give a shit.
you
And
can't
you're like, why? Just
you can't score a live review is basically it's just it's an essay. Well, I mean, and the album review is an essay as well, but I mean, I mean, in the terms of like, with a live review, I find myself predominantly literally revisiting the show, like going through the base of what happened, how the crowd was, how the sound was, how were the stage visuals, this, that, and the other. Um, Ending it on a like, you should definitely go and see this band live, kind of thing. Um,
what do you think's more important, performance or whether or not the band actually sounds good?
I think well, obviously, I don't want to listen to someone out of key, but
Sure.
at the same time, it's what energy you put into the stage as well and to the performance. It's like if I go and see someone whose voice is absolutely phenomenal, perfect, 10 out of 10, but he just sits in front of the mic stand and just sings for an hour. I'm going to enjoy someone who is slightly less, like more off key, but they're jumping around stage. They're like giving their all into it. You know what I mean? Um, and bear with, I've had my fair share of fucking live reviews. Like I had burnout at some point last year, like because I went to that many that I couldn't physically go to them anymore. Um, and that was like starting from December 2021, I think it was Zuzu at the Deaf Institute. That's the first live show I ever did. And it was, as I said, it was like a crossover of Taylor Swift and Arctic Monkeys.
One thing I find very interesting about like a career like this, where someone gets into something they love, music, but then it becomes their career. And so, like, obviously, if I asked you how many bands have you seen over the years, you wouldn't be able to give me a number because there's that many. You just wouldn't.
It's in the
But like,
hundreds.
that's the thing. If you've seen that many, like, how do you stay excited and passionate about it? Like, what's the driving force for you?
Well, it's what I said. Currently, at the minute, I'm taking a small break from writing. At this time of we're talking, it's been like about a few weeks now. And I'm going to Outbreak paid. I think that's the main difference. I feel like now that I've actually paid for a festival instead of going to review it, I'm out of that mindset of. I feel like it's going to be like kind of like a breather, like a bit of a refresh.
But do you,
Uh,
okay, because I found this when I became a musician, I started being in bands, started being in the industry. Like, I never saw a music performance the same way ever again.
I
In a
know.
way, it kind of ruined it for me.
I don't get a kick out of gigs anymore.
I was gonna say, like, you go to a festival and you're like, or a gig, and you're enjoying it, like, and you're just there as a fan, you're enjoying it, but
Yeah.
you surely in your head you're
I,
still
I,
going,
I don't get a kick out of gigs anymore. As much as I used to, which is it's a sad, but
yeah,
it doesn't stop me from going or doing it. It's just
sure.
that I feel like it's kind of altered my brain to which even if I'm going paid to a gig, I'll walk in and I'll have to analyze the whole fucking thing. I can't just sit and have a breather. Unless I'm drunk, then it's a different story. But like it's it's I guess I just got used to it by this point. I feel like the worst it was during that like burnout where it was probably the worst material in my eyes that I've probably written. Even though people were like, "Oh, Dan, it's really good," I was like, I hate it because I know for a fact that I went to like 5, 6 shows during the burnout period to review them, and I just churned out the most like uninspired review I have ever done in my entire life because it was a case of wow, go show, explain how gig was, what you liked about gig, that's it. And looking back on those reviews, I kind of wish I never published them because I had no passion in them whatsoever. It was.
I mean, it's a learning curve. Do you know what I mean? Like,
It's not.
I get what you're saying. Like,
It is, like obviously you can't be on top of form like 24/7 in it. You're gonna have days where you're off, but it's
you just have shifts of motivation. I mean, take my podcast as an example. I've been doing this 4 years. I really thought by this point I'd have like a physical setup. I'd have a big, huge following. I'd have sponsors. I'd have this, that, and the other. I don't have any of that shit. I've got a small, comfortable following. Thank you so much for watching and listening, guys. I have. I'll tell you one thing I do have. I have the joy and the privilege to get to interview people like yourself from all around the world and get to have these kind of conversations and know that I can do it. I don't have to worry, like, and then that's something that's changed over the years because I did used to worry. I did used to think like, can I do this? Da, 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 da.
yeah.
And then now it's like second nature. But I've had those moments where I'm like, oh, what's even the fucking point? This isn't going anywhere. This isn't doing anything. And I have that with, across everything that I do. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
gigs is a good example. Like I haven't had a gig since May, I think, or early May, and that's dried out.
yeah,
Acting, I've got one thing on the go right now, and otherwise zero. It's been a
yeah.
hard year. Mostly, I've just been doing hospitality.
Well,
It's been hard, and it's difficult to find that motivation to keep going. But then you get these moments.
I think that for the most part, like what keeps me going is the fact that, like, look, I'm 23 years old. Yeah, I have so many years ahead of me to get past the learning curves. I don't even think I've hit my peak yet as a writer. It's like there's so much more to experience. And it's small moments. It's moments like you know, making friends with band members, having PRs acknowledge you, like being mates with PRs, this, that, and the other. Having the bands like or reshare, sorry, all that kind of stuff is like, you know what? Yeah, and this is just the beginning, and that's what's kind of that's kind of the drive behind it.
And this is something you're really good at is the networking element. Because when I've heard you speak about it, I've always kind of been fascinated by how you set these things up, And then also how bands react to you. They get excited about your reviews, like, "Oh, wicked, he's put this out." Da, da, da,
Yeah,
da,
like
da. Like,
I think what I do is I just like in any case where I'm at a gig, I'm always quite open to talking to people, and it's like um I'll go up, I'll speak to band members after the gigs. I'll like message PRs myself, trying to like speak to them. I become yeah, I don't know, I've got this knack for like meeting people that are end up being in the industry in some way or another.
yeah.
Um and the networking has really helped. Like I think it's the most crucial part of being in an industry like this. You need to know people because
Yep.
that's how you get it. As sad as it sounds, it's like you need to know people.
I know no one. I try
Yeah,
so hard. I know no
yeah, and obviously
one.
the people I do know have helped, have been like supportive as fuck. They've helped so much, like one of the bands that I've always supported since day one have been Static Dress. Um, love them, love them to bits. Kind of like a alt post-hardcore kind of like vibe. Their album Rouge Carpet Disaster is phenomenal. Like
A great name for an album.
concept album. If you listen to it start to finish, they put 3 years beforehand into writing lore and they planned out all the music videos and everything has been like planned. Um,
I can remember you telling me about this. Didn't they have like something to do with the albums where there were like little Easter eggs hidden in? You had to like
yeah, 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 yeah,
follow
yeah.
something like that.
So they've grown and followed as well. I remember like reviewed their live show at the Deaf Institute before they released the debut album, and it wasn't sold out. And ever since then, I've had this beautiful kind of connection and relationship with a lot of them, where it's like, you know, I'll speak to Sam, the drummer, about how the shows are going when they're on tour. It's like they'll repost the things that I write about and like them and share them. Um, when I reviewed their headliner gig at the Underworld in 2022, they sold it out. It was the biggest sold out show that they'd done up until that point. Um, and that's quite a funny story actually, because I wasn't supposed to review it originally. I had bought my ticket and I went down to see him, but there was something about it that felt really kind of like I need to record this moment. I need to like document this moment. So I emailed my editor at the time and I was like, look, I'm currently at the Underworld getting ready to watch Static Dress. I've paid for a ticket. I don't care. Can I do this review? I don't mind that I've paid. I feel like I need to do this review. And she was like, yeah, go for it. But we don't have photos, So I was like, don't
Mm.
worry, I'll do my best. I'll try and find a photographer at the show. So networking skills obviously come in clutch. I meet one of the photographers, Jamie Waters, absolute legend. He does photography for like Cassier, Bring Me the Horizon. Like he's a sick guy. Didn't expect to bump into him, but obviously I was having a chat with him. I was like, look, I'm reviewing tonight. We need photos. Am I cool having some of yours if we give you the credits, obviously? And it was like, yeah, yeah, that's sound. So I think to this day, probably the two biggest like flexes I have in my career as a journo so far is a Jamie Waters Jamie Waters photos is on my Static Dress Underworld review on Square One, and then B would probably be the Hans Zimmer show. That one kind of that one was quite insane. Um,
Tell us more about that.
yeah, so my third ever review as a journalist was a Hans Zimmer at AO Arena.
Damn. How's that come
Yeah,
about?
I just asked for it and they said yeah.
See, ask and you shall receive, people.
Yeah, that's the mentality I follow. It's like just ask for it. Worst they can say is no, and if they say no, someone else is going to say yes. Um,
Damn, that is some great advice right there. Thank you for that. Yeah.
but that was a wild one because like I was like, yeah, well, I'll review it, sure, and I was expecting like proper, just like back seats. Um, and they had us bang in the middle, 3 rows from the stage. Like to give
Mad.
you an idea, like two rows ahead of me to the right, like was Johnny Marr. So
Easy, man.
I was on crutches.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
I was on
Shit.
crutches for that. I did 7 shows in 2 weeks on crutches with a review.
Jeez.
And they were all great shows. There were shows that I would have probably gone into the mosh pit for if I didn't have crutches as well. Or been in the crowd at least, you know. It was Hans Zimmer, JPEG Mafia, um, Pink Panthers, Thundercat,
Mad. All
um,
right.
Action Bronson, The Alchemist, and Earl Sweatshirt, and I think it was those five actually. Yeah, yeah, it must have been those five because it was all around the span of like April to towards May. Um, but yeah, that's what I mean. It's like very, very interesting experiences, like gig wise. Which is why, obviously, because I've checked off most of my bucket list. It's probably why I don't get a kick out of them anymore because I've just seen too many.
So I've got a few interesting questions for you regarding reviews again. We spoke about obviously getting to be friends with different artists and the benefits of that and why that's important from a business perspective, but also just in general, why it's cool.
Yeah,
Do people ever try to befriend you so that they can get more favorable reviews?
I haven't encountered that yet personally.
Yet being the key word there.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah.
The only ones I can think of would be like a few people in uni that kind of like saw I was doing bits and then approached me for a single review.
Yeah.
To which I state I was like, look, I like purely respect like my professionalism and myself. So if you do want a review, I am going to be honest. But if it's more, I try and do it more of like a constructive criticism way than actually shitting on a song or an album. Um, it's more like I don't think this worked, but this is how it could be improved. Because people usually come to him with the argument of like, "Oh, you're just a writer, but you don't know fuck all this, that, and the other." I'm like, "Hey, no, I don't think that's how it works." Also, fun fact: I did study basic music theory in school in Greece because that was one of the mandatory lessons.
There we
So
go.
if something doesn't sound right, I can tell.
It's like
uh,
what we were saying about Melon earlier, Fantano, like same thing. Studies music, fan of
yeah,
music. Like it's I think it helps that much more when you come from a background in music. Obviously, you've seen so many artists over the years. You get an appreciation for it. You know music, you feel it, you vibe it, you're around it every day. Like I would say that makes you more than qualified. But people get pissed off because they're like, well, unless you're an expert at drums, how dare you comment
yeah.
on the
It's like
drums? And it's like, well,
you can't comment on this like guitar. You're not Jack White, like fucking
but
okay,
that always bothered me. Like, anyone can have an opinion.
yeah.
Do you know? Anyone can like. I could write a review tomorrow, and people might give me shit for that. But like, that's my opinion. You can't be like, oh, you can't have that opinion. You can have any opinion you want. Like, people will agree with you, disagree with you. That's the nature of opinions. Do you know
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean?
it's like you're not going to have everyone agreeing with you, and that's kind of like the mentality to go with. It's like that's why I don't get discouraged if anyone does shit on my writing because it's like, well, that's fine. It's your opinion. I've got this guy who likes it. It's like I know how I feel about I already know how I feel about what I've written because I wrote it. It's like it's you can't really kind of shift my opinion on that, but. There have been some cases in which albums have grown on me, or albums that I originally liked that I have liked less. You know,
Mm.
um, and I think that just comes with time because obviously I find your music taste does shift depending on kind of what situation you're in. It's
Well, it just feels differently, doesn't it? Like
yeah,
you listen to something that you listened to like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 5 years ago, even a year ago, it can feel different. And I think as well, a big thing about music is that sometimes it can be attached to sentiment, to a time in your life. Like obviously, certain songs remind us of certain things, times in our life. And so there's that rose tinted glasses effect, or there's that kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
like I don't know, like your personal feelings get in the way, and it's impossible to push them aside unless you purely only listen to this thing like as a one-off, so you can review it.
Well, that's what I mean. It's like
But
I can't really do metalcore anymore. Well, for the time being, at least. Uh, really enjoy hardcore. I think that hardcore has got a completely different energy to it. You know, it's like you go in there and your adrenaline spikes to 100 because obviously the setting you're in, the music, you know, this, that, and the other. I like the tempos, you know, I like a lot about it. Whereas I can't really do metalcore anymore. Like in the current time, I feel like I just find it quite cringy. Um,
fair
uh,
enough.
but I enjoy hardcore a lot. I'm getting back into my hip hop and my electronica because I grew up a hip hop kid. And then during my teens, my main phase was electronic music, and then through electronic music, I got into metal. Weirdly enough,
Hmm?
the transitions were basically hip hop listens to Wild for the Night, ASAP Rocky featuring Skrillex, gets into electronic music through that, and then Phase One, this dubstep artist, had done collaboration songs with North Lane and Thy Art Is Murder at the time, and then that's what kind of like got me into metal more extensively. Um, but nah, I'm enjoying my hip hop shows so far, man. Yeah, this month I've been to I went to see Danny Brown. I went to see Vince Staples recently. He was phenomenal. Um, Want to go see Earl Sweatshirt in September again. Love Earl Sweatshirt. But but yeah, no. To go on tangents to reiterate the question that you said. No, yet not yet. I haven't had people like befriend me purely because of the music journalism aspect.
Good.
And
So don't try.
oh, I've you know, I can tell from a mile away. You can tell.
Was that when I asked you about the like doing it for my album when it eventually gets released? My thought process was, well, I want to see what your process is first. You know, like where do I apply? Do you mean? Because I'm not just obviously you have connections. That's the reality of things, but I still treat it as business.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
do you know what I mean? And I think that more often than not, people go like, oh, we're friends. You just do this for me, can't you? And it's like, well, yeah, I could, but like, I shouldn't really. Do
yeah,
you know what I mean? It's a
yeah,
bit like when
yeah,
people
yeah.
expect you to pay like mates rates for a business. It's like, no, pay full price. Support your friends.
It's like when someone comes in, it's like a staff discount on the drink, and I'm like,
There you
no,
go. Yeah.
no, I can't do that. It's only for me. You know, let me enjoy my perks of my job for fuck's sake. You know, um, but
Okay.
yeah,
On the same line, have you ever refused to do reviews? And if so, why?
um, I think that obviously I'd refuse to review bands of which morals I don't agree with because
Right.
I know for a fact that if I review a band I don't like, with morals I don't agree with, it's automatically going to be biased in that sense. So I'd rather not.
But yeah,
Um,
it hasn't come up yet. Like you've not had that
no, no, no,
situation.
it hasn't come up yet. But like, let's say if someone approached me and asked me to fucking review Fallen in Reverse, I'd send them straight out the door. You know, it's like it's one.
Yeah.
No, um, I don't think I've ever seen a more problematic tour lineup than that one they've just announced.
It's always strange, isn't it? I mean,
Slaughter to Prevail, Hollywood Undead, and
yeah.
Fall Verse, it has to be the most problematic lineup I've ever seen, like as of yet. And it baffles me that people like go on rants about Ronnie Radke, but they've sold out AO Arena going to watch him. It's the same
Well,
people.
there's always going to be people that don't really care and will just go
Yeah,
regardless. And I think a lot of that comes down to, well, yeah, just not caring, I guess. I mean, like it's the same as like people still buy Harry Potter books. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
Same thing.
That's fair enough. Like, obviously, I've it's one of those in which like I feel I was having a chat with one of my mates and they were on about talking about like they hate Ronnie Radke as a human being,
Fair
but
play.
they're going to they're going to satisfy their 14-year-old self in that sense because they used.
Do you know what? Do you know what it is? Like, I get that because you
Yeah,
talk about this idea of like separating the art from the artist. Like, I wish I could do that. I mean, I remember like, okay, here's one. You ready for this? So, Lost Prophets
oh
is a big
gee,
one.
yeah,
And I think a lot of people felt like we got robbed of something there.
yeah,
Like, I can't listen to it anymore. I remember there was a TikTok trend about a year ago, and the song started popping up again, and it was like traumatic
yeah,
because on one hand there was the nostalgia, like, oh my god, I haven't heard this in 10 years, and then you instantly remember, and you're like, ah, shit. Ah. And then here's the thing as well. I remember, I'll never forget this when the band put out the statement after it happened and they made their new band and everything, and they moved forward and past it. I felt so bad for them at the time. Like, it fucking sucks. How do you even process something like that, right? But they said that they couldn't play those songs anymore because they felt tainted. And I look at it the same way. Like, you take a band like Falling in Reverse, right? And Ronnie Radke and everything that's going on there. Like, I imagine it probably feels the same for a lot of fans. Like, these things that you grew up with, that you have a connection with. Maybe this song, I don't know, was playing in the background when you kissed your first lover. I don't know, like,
yeah,
you
yeah.
just, you know what I mean. And now it's like, this guy's a arsehole. And
I no, I get it because like it was similar with as the most recent like Slow Tie, like when Tyron released, I still have that on vinyl. You know, it's like I can't play it. It feels wrong. It feels wrong playing it.
but
I like
I know people that can do that. That are just like, oh yeah, you know what? It's not the same thing. And I'm like, I guess. I don't
yeah.
know.
Or there's that, or like for example, I'm gonna bring up the case of Kanye West once because I feel like
Fair enough.
he's an artist that is very. Here's the thing, yeah. I think that despite his past 2, 3 years, if you look at College Dropout up until The Life of Pablo, where he was still controversial in The Life of Pablo, but it was marginally less controversial than the whole Nazi shit that has been going on with these ones. I do think that he has done a lot for hip hop. He's a visionary in terms of his music. Like you can't his production on
Mhm.
point features like these albums are amazing. But I feel like he's tainted his image so much that even if his new albums are great, I can't bring myself to like, you know what I mean? I can't bring myself to say, oh, Vultures One was a really good album because it feels wrong, you know. Whereas,
Well, it's like the meme, isn't it? Like when people talk about like, oh, I miss the old Kanye, and it's like now it's not even a meme anymore. It's just a fact. Like everyone misses old Kanye because this new guy just sucks. Like it's
it
just not
it's
this.
insane. I don't I like a lot of people. I've seen theories online, like you know how people are with the whole theory kind of thing, where it goes on and on and on to the point where it's like, oh well, we think that he just gets more extreme because he tries to get on the press every time he's about to drop an album. And I'm like, yeah, but there's different ways of going about it than saying that Hitler was right. You know, like
Yeah,
you don't have to do that.
I think I said this to a guest a while back that I think he's just very very unwell. And I'm not saying that that's an excuse, but I think that like that always has to be taken into account. That like the person we remember that we grew up with, I think that person is long gone. There's reasons for that. Some people speculate when his mother died, it really kind of just drove him down the wrong path.
Oh no, that
Um,
when his mother died, that's what kind of just
Broke him. Yeah.
yeah.
Which is, I mean, from a human perspective, I think we can all kind of relate to something like that. But I think as well, like it's other things like the nature of the industry, the people you're surrounded by. This is why I always like take a good hard look at like my friends who I'm surrounded
Yeah.
by and always just make sure like, am I surrounded by the right people? Do these people have the best interests for me or not?
You don't want yes men, and
No,
that's not just as an artist, that's not just as someone in the music industry, that's as a human being, you don't want yes men.
no.
Like you need people that understand you, know how you work, are there for you regardless of if you see them or not, like um it's I think it's kind of like a fundamental kind of rule of relationships, really. You can't have someone that you can't. I feel like the people that are not there for you. You see, that's what I mean. It's like I always make this distinction in my head. I've got friends and I've got acquaintances.
Yep. Yeah, yeah. I was talking to Scoot the other day. You guys won't know who that is, but he's a legend. Yeah, big up. Woo.
Uh,
Yeah, I mean, well, friends show up for you. Acquaintances,
Acquaintances
you can
is
hang out, but yeah,
I'll bump into you at Grand Central or the Shakespeare. I'll say hello, like we'll have a chat, this,
sure.
that. A friend's someone that will be there if you need them. You can confide in them. You know that they won't go about like
Yeah,
chatting shit or whatever. But was it on the topic of that? It's like it's interesting to see because like so many artists bring it back to the artist side of it. It's baffling how so many artists have yes men.
yeah,
And not just that, but then obviously, I find it's a really weird state because obviously, with superstar artists, you've got your fans that think you can do no wrong, in which like even if an album releases completely mid, they'll and you say, oh, well, I didn't enjoy it that much. They'll literally go on comment under your comment and being like, haha, you don't know about music, you're a piece of shit, this, that, and the other. This guy's the best artist in the world. Um, which is funny. I'm gonna bring up a recent example for that, which is the Kendrick Lamar and Drake beef.
yeah. This is an interesting one.
Um, and I am personally so happy that I got to be in alive in like as a 23-year-old, being fully aware of what's going on in the industry. To be able to witness something like that is just insane because obviously Kendrick is like largely just like a quiet soul. Like he'll do his albums every like 4 years. He stays out of the limelight for those 4 years. He'll drop an album, do a tour, rinse, repeat. Each album is like a different subject matter based on his life at the time. It's just a solid artist. And he never usually comes out of the woodwork for things like that. And it feels like he had this whole thing planned for years. It feels like it does feel like those diss tracks were like he probably wrote them like 4 or 5 years ago. Like
Really?
so to see all of Drake's fans say that he won the rap battle just because obviously they can't fathom the thought of Drake not having a good record.
He always
Even though Drake
loses.
hasn't had a good record since if you're reading this, it's too late.
He never wins any rap beefs.
Oh, he
And like,
got he
look,
got wadded by Pusha T. He got it's like it's hip hop is one of those where it's like it can just get so hectic out of nowhere. And like Kendrick, I think Kendrick is one of the artists that I would probably be the most excited to see because I have not seen him yet. I missed the
it'll
chance.
happen.
I missed the chance to go to the Big Steppers tour in 22, I think it was. But I know I'll see him eventually. You
It'll
know,
happen.
he's one of
Probably
them.
end up reviewing him, interviewing him.
I've had. Well, I wanted to do the Big Steppers tour, but it was a strict no media
Ah,
because obviously it was 10-year anniversary for Good Kid, Mad City, so all the press got confirmed for his Paris show, and there were like no media for the rest. So that was quite interesting. Yeah.
There you go. Right, a couple of final questions for you to round everything off, completely unrelated to today's topic. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Hmm. What is in terms of like
Could be
life
anything. It could be
anything?
anything. Anything.
Credit is a prison sentence.
Say that again.
Credit is a prison sentence
Okay, why?
because obviously, or like if you buy things that if you're paying off of something that you're paying back and you can't afford it, then
Oh,
just
I
don't buy it.
see. I thought you meant like getting credit for something. I didn't think like
No, 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 no,
monetary
no.
credit. Like,
Like actual
oh yeah,
monetary credit. Yeah.
yeah. No, fair. No, that's yeah, fair play.
And I don't know what else. I was gonna. I'll say one for life and one for journalism, I guess.
Awesome.
So that was my life. Big up my dad. Love him to bits.
Woo.
And journalism, I think it'd be. I think it'd be that one for the interviews where Edgar told me, where it was like, save the hectic questions for last. Because you never know if you throw that midway through and you haven't established the connection with them, they're just going to walk out on you. Like there's no middle ground on that.
I'll add to that as well. Like when I've seen like the some of the worst interviews over the years for actors, musicians, stuff like that. Like I guess I've spent a lot of time being intrigued by it because it's just interesting. But also, as I became an interviewer, I started to pay attention to like to my mind, the key is to make your guest feel as comfortable as possible.
Yeah,
You get more out of your guest that way, and also to not like have an agenda, to not like try and catch people out. Like the Robert Downey Jr. one comes to mind because I remember he was trying to promote a film, and was it Christian Guru Murphy, the Channel 4 interviewer, was like asking him about drugs and like his arrest like 15 odd years ago, and it was like, what bearing does this have on anything? Like what's the purpose here? What we try, and I think he even said that, he's like, what are we trying to do here? Like, do you want to ask me about the film or not? Or like,
yeah,
and it's okay to ask things like that are outside of the film, like maybe related, what's going on in their life. I think to a certain extent, especially if there's big things going on in your life at that time, you have to expect those questions. I see it a lot in wrestling press conferences when there's like something going on in the wrestler's personal life or whatever, or maybe a business thing, rumblings, they're going to get asked about it. Um, but like sometimes it just comes off as like big disrespect. And I think the one thing that irritates me about music reviewers is you see it less so now. I think people have learned over the years, but back in the day, there was a lot of people that just would just ask dumb fuck questions or not be very serious or try and
yeah.
like catch musicians out, make them look foolish. And then it's like, is it any wonder why they told you to F off or walked out? Like it just,
Exactly. It's just like fucking, be more conscious about who you like. Read the room, man. It's
well,
like,
yeah, like I think yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of musicians you could do that with, and or actors or whatever, and they react positively, and it'd be a laugh. But other times, it's like, yeah, man, like I'll give you a really good example. This one comes to mind. So the Bee Gees, right? Were being interviewed by I think it's Clive Owen. He's like a satire BBC also presenter. Most famously, he did Whose Line Is It Anyway? The UK version. He's a presenter for that. Just satire, and he's a funny guy, good at what he does. But in this particular show that he was doing, it was a Channel 4 satire show late in the evenings. They had the Bee Gees as guests. They knew ahead of time that they might get mocked a little bit, right? And they could take it. But the thing is, at this point in their career, it was like the early 2000s, late 90s. Obviously, disco is not really a thing anymore. They're changing, evolving. Everyone's evolving. Like things have moved on, and they were trying to kind of get back into the industry and do their thing, do their tours. It's still massively popular, but just things have changed. But back then, the whole thing was like, oh, let's just mock everyone, make a laugh out of everything, right? And it was, first of all, it was a bad pairing. But secondly, Clive Owen just ripped them to shreds, and it just came off really like classless, I guess is the best way I could put it. And because they were trying to answer the questions, and then they were like, yeah, kind of exposing him for being classless with his responses and questions. And eventually they just like slowly walked off one by one. And it just made Clive look like an idiot. You know, he
Yeah.
was trying to kind of salvage it, and it's like what you just said, read the
Yeah.
room. You know, like he should have just tried to do it more serious, had a few jabs, and left it at that. But you know, there we are.
Yeah.
What's the biggest life lesson you've learned so far?
Oh, fuck it all.
The big guns.
Um, I've had a few. Um, yeah, I think obviously the biggest one I've got to this, like for me at least, the one I try to apply to my everyday life is the fact that like uh, in terms of your career, but not only your life, acknowledge that you've got so many years ahead of you to learn and kind of reach a peak because I think a lot of people my age stress when they don't get big things come to them at the age of like 20, 21, 22. It's like you don't have to have everything figured out. You've got time, you take it at your own pace kind of thing. Um, Especially when it comes to like careers, like you don't I see a lot of people like compare themselves to others that have gotten bigger opportunities in a shorter amount of time. And I'm like, just take your own pace, it'll come eventually, like just keep grafting, just keep putting the work in. Um and
This is all too real
that,
right now.
that just kind of keeps me motivated at least because it's like sometimes I'll be like, oh shit, but then I go back and I'm like, well, Dan, you're just 23. You've got so many years ahead to just focus and grow as a writer, as a person. It's like this is literally the beginning. It's like I've just like finished uni, and it's like, well, now I actually feel like my life's starting. you know.
Take it from me because I've not really made any progress at all. I'm like living in the sea of stagnation. You are absolutely smashing it. The future's bright. Like it's awesome to see.
Also, um, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and say it as well. Because obviously uni life, party life, this, that, and the other. But I've cut down marginally on drinking
All right, nice
uh,
one.
than I did in my uni days and everything. Like to the point where I practically don't really drink at all anymore, and I feel fucking fantastic. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
so
helps.
it helps, yeah, it really does. And what other life lesson? I'd probably fit one more in there. Hmm, I don't know. Always wear a condom.
There you go.
There you go.
Sage life advice. Thank you so much. Yeah, final question for you. Do you have any upcoming projects or final thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Um, I have some. Oh, well,
Something in the works, huh?
it depends on. I can't really say at the
No?
minute.
All right.
But it's. I'm excited. I'm excited. That's all I can say on it. I'm excited. Um, and quite obviously, I'm also quite open, and I've started dabbling in researching the promotion side of music
Ooh.
as well. Um, because obviously there's been times where I've reviewed bands that were small that I thought were going to go big, and they have ended up going big. So I'm like, what if I put them on while they're small, knowing that they're going to go big? So that is definitely an area that I would like to explore in the future. So yeah.
Massive, man. Thank you so much for this
No
conversation,
worries,
for
man.
for
Thank
sharing your
you for
knowledge
having
and
me.
experiences. It's been incredible.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Absolute pleasure. Always welcome back on the show. And to the listeners of the Christian Reeve podcast, I hope you enjoyed this show as much as I did. If you're watching on YouTube, as always, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Leave us a comment, leave us a review, all that jazz. I mean, if anything, we've established how important reviews are. So in this show, make sure you leave a review. If you listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening to the show, please leave us a review, a rating. Please share the podcast around with your friends, anyone you think might enjoy the show. If you want to support me in everything that I do and get yourself more content, go to www.patreon.com/Christian Reeve. And as always, be safe, be well, and I'll see you in the next one.